Good morning, everyone. Today's class is on regressive alterations of teeth. As we all know, regressive alteration is related to age-changing process. Okay, it is not necessarily related to any etiology or pathology, but it is a aging process which causes injury to the tissues of the oral cavity, specifically the teeth, and the lesions are retrograde in nature. And this could be of various types. The regressive alterations could be caused due to either tooth-to-tooth contact, that is mainly night grinding or chewing. Another one is chemical dissolution of the tooth surface. High example is the highly acidic diet. Another one is friction from the exogenous materials such as the toothbrush or toothpick, etc. So this is a picture showing attrition mainly on the occlusal surface where the tooth and tooth comes in contact during mastication or night grinding, which had caused the severe loss of tooth. In this picture, you could see there is attrition up to the level of gingiva causing pulpal exposure. And this is another picture showing cervical abrasion. The mechanical force, which is mainly the toothbrushing, abnormal toothbrushing habit, had destroyed, removed a part of enamel near the cervical region, where the enamel thickness is very minimal. So this is again a similar picture, but you could see compared to the previous one. In the previous slide, we saw that the erosion is restricted only to the cervical region, whereas here it is almost covering the entire surface of the tooth. This is mainly because of the chemical erosion. So the chemicals could be of two types, extrinsic and intrinsic. The extrinsic chemicals, extrinsic acids could be the juice, the lemon juice, or the beverages which contain acids. Whereas the intrinsic acids could be due to the gastric acid which comes out because of gastroesophageal reflex. So starting with the attrition, it is an aging process where there is physiological wearing away of tooth as a result of tooth-to-tooth contact as in mastication. So this tooth-to-tooth contact need not necessarily be on the occlusal surface. It could be even on the proximal surface. We all know that the tooth contacts its adjacent tooth by proximal area. So the attrition also happens on the proximal surface. So the cause of attrition is coarse diet, habits such as chewing tobacco and bruxism. And certain people working under manufacturing company of asbestos, that is they are exposed to the atmosphere of abrasive dust. So even they are prone to this type of attrition. So who are most affected? It is mainly the older age people. However, deciduous dentition is also prone to this sort of attrition. Also, people with dentinogenesis imperfecta and amelogenesis imperfecta are also affected by this attrition. Mostly it is the men who exert great masticatory force are affected with this attrition. So as we all know, the attrition happens mainly on the occlusal, incisal and the proximal surface, not on the cervical region. If it occurs on the cervical region, it could be mainly abrasion. So how does it manifest? It has two manifestations at the early period and the advanced period. At the early period, it appears as a small polished facet on the cusp tip or on the ridge. So, and on also on the proximal surface. And there will be slight flattening of the incisal edge in case of incisal tooth. And in the molars and premolars, it will be the reduction in the cuspal height. So when there is wearing on the proximal surfaces, there will be shortening of the length of the arch. And in advanced cases, there may be loss of tooth structure to such an extent that the crown is totally worn down nearly to the gingiva. And also the tooth takes up the color of the food materials, whatever we take, and it turns into yellow or brown because mainly of the food particle, coffee stain, tea stain, like that. So this is again the same picture. The first picture shows the incisal wearing away, a mild early stage, and the second one is the advanced stage where there is pulpal exposure and the attrition is up till gingiva. So you could see the occlusal surface, incisal surface are all involved. So this X-ray picture, IOPA reveals a proximal wearing of tooth, which is nothing but a attrition. So we should be very cautious in diagnosing an attrition from a dental caries. So what could be the consequence of this attrition? So once the enamel is worn away, what will happen? The dentinal tubules will get exposed. So when the dentinal tubules are exposed, there is irritation of the odontoblastic process, and this will initiate the formation of secondary dentin. So usually we call it as tertiary dentin, or here they mean it as reparative secondary dentin. So this will help in the prevention or protection of pulp from further injury. Sometimes little pulpal horns could also be exposed. The next is abrasion. As we know, this is mainly due to the mechanical process, abnormal toothbrushing process or continuous using of toothpick. All this may cause this sort of lesion. Okay, so mainly exposed area are the root surface where the enamel, cemento-enamel junction is formed. Okay, so where the enamel is very, very, very minimal. So main cause is the abrasive dentrifice. So when the dentrifice is very coarse and you are going to use this injudiciously over your tooth, the dentrifice along with the toothbrush is going to erode away the enamel, causing abrasion. And also this could be seen in tailors where they keep their bobby pins over their teeth. So this is also a mechanical stimuli. Okay, so the bobby pin is also a mechanical stimuli where it causes abrasion. So how does it appear? We saw in the previous picture, it appears mainly near the cervical region and it takes up a peculiar shape. This abrasion takes up a peculiar shape, that is V shape or wedge shaped ridge. And there is a sharp angle formed in the depth of the lesion. And at the contact area of the enamel, it is also a sharp angle. And the exposed dentin here is highly polished and the tooth root is exposed. And this sort of abrasion could be seen in right-handed people who brush vigorously will be exposing their cervical dentin on the left side. Okay, so left side. So we brush it this way and the abrasion occurs on the left side. Whereas the left-handed people, they do it on the right side and the abrasion is most commonly seen on the right side. So this is a typical cervical abrasion. So a deep V-shaped notch which forms an angle at the depth of the lesion, and the surface where the abrasion contacts the enamel is very much sharp. And this is an X-ray picture showing a typical cervical abrasion. So in the previous picture with the attrition, we saw that the attrition was almost flat, whereas here in this IOPA, it is V-shaped notch. So notching on the incisal edge, mainly due to the habitual opening of bobby pins. So this previous picture is for the improper toothbrushing, and this one is for the bobby pin holders, mainly the tailors, shoemakers, carpenters, and habitual pipe smokers. So all these people, they tend to hold the pins at the incisal edge, wherein there is loss of tooth structure. So sometimes, as I told you, the abnormal toothpick using and the dental floss could also result in this sort of abrasion. So the consequence again is similar to attrition, where the enamel surface is lost, followed by the exposure of dentinal tubules, which will initiate the odontoblastic cells to form the dentin. So this is a typical picture of a person holding a nut. Okay, so he's a nutcracker. He holds a nut in between the teeth, and so there's a notching on the incisal edges. So the abrasion could not only happen on the cervical region, it could also happen on the proximal surface and also on the incisal surface. So next is erosion. Erosion, as the term itself says, it is a chemical process. It is again an irreversible loss of dental hard tissue by a chemical process that does not involve bacteria. So it is not all these processes, attrition, abrasion, erosion, are not related to dental caries or microbial invasion. So it is all we created. So our mistake of handling the tooth creates this sort of lesion. So this erosion is a chemical process where there is dissolution of the mineralized tooth structure, and mainly, as I told, it could be due to the intrinsic factor or extrinsic factor. The intrinsic factors are the gastroesophageal reflex and frequent vomiting. People like having anorexia nervosa and bulimia are intended to develop this sort of dental erosion. So next is the extrinsic source. As I told, this could be the acidic beverages or the citrus fruits. The high acidic content in these things could result in the erosion. So the extrinsic causes could be acid beverages, food, medications, or sometimes the environmental acids. People working in such type of factories. The dietary acids are the fruits, fruit juices, carbonated drinks, and sports drinks. And sometimes calcium, phosphate, and fluoride. So these levels in the teeth are, these acid will attack the calcium, phosphate, and fluoride level of our teeth, and they'll result in the erosion of the tooth. Okay, so if you take this sort of acidic beverages very frequently, mainly orally, so that may definitely result in the abrasion. And sometimes medications which are chewed and held in the mouth prior to swallowing, such as a medication containing vitamin C and hydrochloric acid preparations, those will result in the abrasion. And swimmers who are continuously exposed to the acid pools, so they are also prone for this sort of abrasion. The wine tasters, frequent intake of wine, and people who are pregnant, they are prone for GERD, that is gastroesophageal reflex, and frequent vomiting. So even then they'll be having this. So the intrinsic causes are the gastric acids, which is regurgitated from the esophagus to the mouth, will cause this sort of abrasion. So that is nothing but, as I told previously, it is anorexia nervosa or bulimia. So how does this vomiting or the gastric content comes into our oral cavity? So there is increased abdominal pressure, and which causes relaxation of the lower esophageal sphincter. So this, when there is increased acid production. So when the lower esophageal sphincter is relaxed, so this allows the gastric content to come into our mouth from the esophagus. This gastric content will come into the mouth involuntarily because there is excess of pressure which is going to push the lower esophageal sphincter and open it up so that the gastric acids come into the oral cavity. So this could be modified by our saliva usually, but sometimes even the saliva misses out, or when there is excess of acid load in the oral cavity, so then there will be erosion. So where does this erosion occur? We saw in attrition, it is mainly the incisal and the occlusal surface and the proximal surface. And for abrasion, it is the cervical, incisal, and the proximal surface. And this erosion, mainly if it is due to intrinsic cause, that is, we intentionally or unintentionally vomit frequently or regurgitate frequently. So that may be resulting in erosion on the palatal surface of the teeth, because the acid is held within our mouth behind the teeth. So the affected teeth is the palatal surface of maxillary teeth. Whereas the extrinsic item, whatever we take, the acid beverages or the fruits or any carbonated drinks, all these are taken externally. So the labial surface are exposed more than the palatal surface. So this is an image showing the erosion on the labial surface. So obviously the labial surface, it could be due to the extrinsic source, that is the beverages. So this is again a mild erosion on the labial surface. This is an erosion on the occlusal surface. And management of erosion is mainly diet counseling and refer to a medical doctor for solving GERD. And if there is salivary hypofunction where the saliva couldn't compensate for the acidity of our oral cavity, so we have to stimulate the saliva by giving the patient sugarless chewing gum, mints, and oral pilocarpine. And sometimes we also have to give topical fluorides and occlusal splints. And there's another thing called as upfraction. So what is this upfraction? You all must be very well aware of attrition, abrasion, and erosion. So this is a new term, upfraction. So they thought that this is more of a circumstantial thing. Okay, so they just think that it could be a circumstantial one. Okay, so they don't know what causes it exactly. So they thought that it could be something like a toothbrush abrasion or something like a erosion. But later they concluded that it is excessive occlusal force. Excessive occlusal force. So the biomechanical loading forces, mainly when we are chewing or when we are grinding, clenching. So what will happen? The excess occlusal force is transferred to the tooth. Actually, we know that this trajectory of forces, it is supposed to, the force is supposed to spread, distribute equally over the alveolar process. Instead, if it is a heavy force, the enamel, which is the topmost layer of the tooth, it will break down. It will tend to give away. And the thinnest portion of the enamel is at the cervical region. And the cervical region of the enamel gives away, and that is at the cervical region, which will mimic something similar to your abrasion. But abrasion is a deep V-shaped groove. Here it is not V-shaped. It is just chipping away of enamel at the cervical region. And that is called as upfraction. So there's another condition called as dentinal sclerosis. What is dentinal sclerosis? So we all know from attrition, abrasion, erosion, and upfraction, there is loss of enamel. So when the enamel is lost, what will happen to the dentin? So the dentinal tubules are exposed. So the exposed dentinal tubules will invade saliva, food particles, and also the minerals from our oral cavity and microbes also. If it is going to react in such a way that it's going to absorb the minerals into the dentinal tubules. From the saliva, the dentinal tubules are going to get accumulated with the minerals. So that will cause sclerosis. The dentinal tubules become sclerosed by the deposition of calcium, mainly the calcium salts. So in a ground section, how it appears? It appears as a very shallow dentinal caries, and on the transmitted light, it appears as a translucent zone, because this variation is because of the refractive indices. Okay. So since it is a calcified structure, it does not allow any dye to penetrate through the dentinal tubules. And this dentinal sclerosed area, which is a portion of dentin again, is highly mineralized because it will take up all maximum minerals from the saliva and deposit over the dentinal tubules, which are exposed, so that it does not allow any of the bacteria or the food particles or the saliva to penetrate in, and thereby it decreases the conductivity of odontoblastic process. So here is a decay. This picture shows a decay which has come up till the dentin, and here is our pulp. But this reactionary dentin, so this is a reactionary dentin, which is otherwise called as tertiary dentin. But this brown area, can you see? This brown area is nothing but the infected dentin, which is more sclerosed, which is more mineralized. So this is again a picture showing enamel. This portion is enamel and this portion is dentin. Here there is dental caries which has been affected. This is a ground section. So the dental caries is involved in the enamel. It is almost nearing the dentin, and the brown area here is the dental caries involving the dentin. And you could see a white area, more white area, whitish area, which is nothing but a sclerotic dentin. This whitish area follows the contour of your dental caries. So by that way, we could identify this is the sclerotic dentin and this is the normal dentin. And next is dead tract. So imagine a condition where the dentinal tubules are exposed, and in this dentinal tubules the calcium is deposited. So fine, we get a dentinal sclerosis. Here the dentinal tubules doesn't get sufficient calcium salts to get sclerosed. So what will happen? So the dentinal tubules which contain the odontoblastic process and the dentinal fluid gets displaced, and this will be occupied by, as I told previously, it will be occupied by the saliva, the food particles and the microbes. So this becomes a dead tract. So this allows the penetration of dye. So remember, dental sclerosis does not allow the penetration of dye, whereas the dead tracts allows the penetration of dyes. Okay, so this on ground section appears as white zone and reflected light, and black zone in the transmitted light. So this is because of the different refractive indices. So this is a case of dead tracts. So here you could see there is attrition of enamel and the dentinal tubules appear dark. We all know the dentinal tubule doesn't appear so dark. Okay, so this is a normal dentinal tubule. So this is a blackish appearance of the dentinal tubule because this is air filled. This is air filled. This is filled with saliva. This is filled with microbes. So this appears more dark. So this is a more appropriate picture where almost the enamel is gone and the dentinal tubules are fully exposed into the oral cavity and caused death of the dentinal tubules, resulting in the dead tract. And adjacent to the dead tract, you could see a portion of dentin. Okay, so a different white color dentin. This is nothing but the sclerotic dentin or the tertiary dentin. This is the dentin over here is trying to deposit a more calcified dentin. Here, the calcium salts come from the pulp. So the previously, the dentinal sclerosis, the calcium salts came from the saliva. Here, the calcium salts come from the pulp. So this is again a picture. Here, it was at the incisal edge. Here, it is at the cervical region, near to cervical region. So we can consider this condition as an upfraction where there is partial loss of enamel, okay, so due to excessive occlusal force. So here it is fully dark. So fully dark. This is nothing but a dead tract. So these are various things. Whereas here there is an attrition and there is a crack in the enamel. So this crack could be a excessive occlusal load. Okay, so this will initiate either sclerotic dentin or dead tract. Here it is dead tract, and here again there is a dead tract, and here it is a sclerotic, lesion involving the crown of the tooth. So here there is a reparative dentin formation is happening here. Okay, even here next to the dead tract there is a reparative dentin formation. So what is the secondary dentin? First, when we saw about the enamel changes, we'll leave it here. So we'll just go back and see what all happened. So when it was the enamel changes, the lesions affecting the enamel or the regressive changes of the enamel, we can put it as attrition, abrasion, erosion, and abfraction. So these are the regressive alterations of the enamel. So moving on to the dentinal changes, it is regressive alteration of dentin, that is mainly the dentinal sclerosis, dead tract, and now we are going on to the secondary dentin. So this secondary dentin formation happens after the completion of the root formation. That is, a entire tooth is completely formed. After that, this sort of dentin forms in response to a normal or slightly an abnormal stimulus. Okay, so how it will be? So these dental tubules are irregular, they are less calcified, and they are more collagenous. These are two types. One is the physiological secondary dentin and another one is reparative secondary dentin. Physiological secondary dentin is the one that occurs through the life of a person. You need not have any stimulation at all. So this secondary dentin forms throughout your life. The odontoblast, they survive, and the pulpal chambers, they become narrow, and the dentin thickness become more and more and more as we age. So that is the secondary dentin formation throughout our life. This is a physiological process. And the reparative secondary dentin is otherwise the pathological secondary dentin is otherwise also called as tertiary dentin. So this tertiary dentin is deposited only when there is any sort of injury. So we all know this could be of two types. One is reparative and other one is reactionary dentin. Okay. So the physiological secondary dentin, they are very regular, uniform layer of dentin around the pulp chamber. So innermost layer of the dentin that is near to the pulp is having a uniform layer of a dentin. I said it will be laid throughout the life. It is the aging process until we are alive. This process happens. And this is a very, 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 very slow process. So here in this picture, you could see this line or this thick line is the secondary dentin. The white portion is the enamel. So this is the dentino-enamel junction or the containing the mantle dentin, and this is a circumpulpal dentin, and this portion is the secondary dentin which forms throughout our life. When there is any insult, here there is an abfraction, here a portion of tooth is or the crown is lost. So what will happen? Here the dentin is being insulted, which will result in the formation of tertiary dentin. So that is the reparative dentin, or otherwise called as pathological dentin. So this is a schematic diagram of reparative dentin or the sclerotic dentin along with the secondary dentin formation. So this is a H&E picture showing the dentin and the secondary dentin formation. Here, as you all could see, this is the primary dentin, this is the pulp, and this is again dentin. So we are in the middle of the tooth. So this is dentin, again pulp, and this side is dentin. Okay, so on either side we have the tooth portion, and you could see the wavy dentinal tubules, the fine lines here. These are the odontoblastic process. Okay, so the odontoblast, blue dots. If you could see, the blue dots are the odontoblast, and adjacent to the odontoblast and the dentin, you could see a fine, thin, pale pink stain. So that's nothing but the secondary dentin, which is a physiological dentin, which forms throughout your life. Here, there is a sudden or abnormal thickness of dentin here. So that is nothing but a tertiary dentin. Here it is uniform in thickness. and here also it is uniform in thickness. All of a sudden it is increased, the thickness is increased. So that is the tertiary dentin. Here a more closer picture is the pulp, and this is the dentin. So you could see the secondary dentin, which is faintly stained in H&E, and it is uniform and it is regular, and this is nothing but the secondary dentin. So next is the reparative secondary dentin, or otherwise called as tertiary dentin. So our pathological secondary dentin. Okay, so this happens, or this formation occurs This is a picture showing um, the tertiary dentin formation. It is irregular, it is not uniform. All of a sudden, it has been thickened. Okay, so this is again a H&E picture showing the tertiary dentin. This is the odontoblastic layer. This is a typical osteodentin, where the odontoblast had got entrapped within the dentinal matrix. This resembles something like a bone. So this is called as osteodentin. So this picture shows when there is a filling, even the filling material, which is more irritant, could also cause irritation to the dentin and the dentinal tubules, which will stimulate the odontoblast, and it will result in the formation of the reparative dentin. So here you could see the pulpal space is not uniform. There is abnormal deposition of the dentin, which is causing reduction in the pulpal space. So this is called the secondary, reparative secondary dentin. So this is again a schematic diagram. Enamel, mantle dentin, circumpulpal dentin, and this is the secondary dentin. A uniform layer of dentin is being formed all over the internal surface of the dentin and near the pulp. So this is uniform, but here it is not uniform. So this is a tertiary dentin or the reparative dentin. So how does this reparative dentin formation occurs? So at the first month, it is very much insignificant. At 1 to 1.5 months, it is about 3.5 microns per day, resulting in a proper deposition of clinically visible and clinically evident reparative dentin. That's why when we give a temporary restoration and we ask the patient for, when we do a pulp capping, we give the patient a period of 2 months minimum, so that there is a required amount of dentin, a reparative dentin that's been formed, so that later they can go in for a permanent restoration. So this is about the age changes in the dentin. So starting with the enamel, so attrition, abrasion, erosion, and abstraction. For the dentin, it is dentinal sclerosis, dead tract, secondary dentin, and osteodentin, tertiary dentin. The tertiary dentin could be reactionary dentin and reparative dentin. So moving on with the pulp, it is the pulpal, atrophy of the pulp. That is the reticular atrophy of the pulp. So what happens? The fibers get atrophied, destroyed. So the collagen fibers, the reticular fibers get destroyed, resulting in vacuolization, formation of vacuoles within the pulpal tissue. So this is mostly asymptomatic, and the tooth responds normal to the vitality test. And histologically, when you look in for we know that pulp is a highly cellular structure because it provides undifferentiated mesenchymal cells for when there is a damaged odontoblast. And day in and out, it has more vascularity and it provides much of nutrition. So when these things are hampered due to aging process, there is reduction in the number of cellular elements, and there is degeneration of the fibroblast, undifferentiated mesenchymal cells, and also the odontoblast. Sometimes this sort of image could be produced by abnormal fixation procedure also. In a younger individual, when the pulpal tissue is improperly fixed, it may result in this type of picture. So this is a normal histology of pulp. This is the dentin, the secondary dentin, and this is the odontoblastic layer, and this is the pulp. You could see how richly cellular it is. So this is again a same a view of the developing tooth at the bud stage. Sorry, it is at the bell stage. So you could see the pulp, how rich it is in the cells. Here you could see the cells, they are more vacuolar, porous, and it is degenerated. More of vacuoles, more of vacuoles. Next is the pulp calcification. So this is again a pathological state where there is pulp. This is also called as pulp stone. So this sort of calcification occurs anywhere on the pulpal tissue. So it could be on the pulpal chamber or within the root canal, and it could be a small one or a large one. This is mostly seen in the older people rather than younger people. In young people, it is very, very rare. So these pulp stones could be classified based upon the morphology as discrete pulp stones or diffuse pulp stones. mean discrete means they appear isolated. Diffuse means they appear in groups. And microscopically, it could be true or false. What is the difference between this true pulp stone and a false pulp stone? The true pulp stone, they resemble something like a dentin. So dentin, we know it has tubular structure. These sort of tubular structures are seen in the true denticles, or otherwise called as the pulp stones. Whereas in the false denticles, we don't see such tubular structure. Instead, they appear as concentric rings. And these true denticles and also the false denticles could be either free or attached one. The free denticles, they lie floating within the pulpal tissue, whereas the attached one, they appear attached to the dentin. So this image shows this is the free denticle, this is the attached denticle, and this is again a free denticle. So this denticle or the pulp stone shows a concentric ring. This also shows concentric ring. This does not have any typical tubular structure. Here you could see fine radiating lines. They are similar to the dentinal tubules. So this is a true and free denticle. This is a false free denticle. This is a false attached denticle. And this was a schematic representation, and this is a H&E representation where you could see a pulp stone which does not have any tubular structure and it is floating within the pulpal tissue. So this is a dentin. I mean, here it's mentioned as tertiary dentin, and again this is a layer of odontoblast, and this is the pulp. Within the pulp tissue you could see concentric rings of calcified mass. So this calcified mass, we can put it as a free and false pulp stone. Here you could see radiating lines, and this we could put it as free and true pulp stone. This is an X-ray image where you could see the pulp chamber as well as the root canal is fully calcified. The pulpal tissue is very, very minimal. So here again, the pulpal tissue is very, very minimal. The chamber is almost closed. So diffuse calcifications. So these are nothing but they are mostly seen on the root canals, and they resemble calcification of the body tissue. They are amorphous. They appear as linear strands on the near in the root tissue, root pulpal tissue, mainly parallel to the blood vessels, nerves of the pulp. The etiology is unknown. However, it is not associated with the pulpal irritation or inflammation. And sometimes they have observed there is presence of streptococci. Though it is not associated with dental caries, but they have recovered streptococcus. So these are the diffuse calcification. The dark blue stains are the diffuse calcifications. So they appear as linear strands near the blood vessels and the nerves. So how does this linear or diffuse calcification occur? They occur mainly due to restorative procedures and the materials. So these restorative procedures may result in trauma to the blood vessel. So when there is damage in the blood vessel, so they may form a nidus. When there is a thrombosis, the thrombosed area forms a nidus, which will attract the minerals and will result in the formation of pulp stone. And sometimes it also could hamper the local metabolism, and it causes hyalinization of the injured cells, resulting in fibrosis and thereby formation of the nidus. Okay, so one could be the vascular damage, or another one could be the local metabolic dysfunction causing injury of the cells. So whatever the cause is, it is resulting in the pulp stone by formation of the nidus. So clinically, the patient does not have pain at all. Very rarely they may have a mild pulpal pain to very severe excruciating pain, something similar to tic doulorex. It's nothing but trigeminal neuralgia. However, they have not seen any of the denticle impinging on the nerves of the pulp. Okay, so though the denticles are associated with the pulpal vessels and the nerves, they don't impinge on the nerves. But the cause of the pain is unknown. It is the pulp calcification, and the clinical manifestation is purely coincidental because some patients, they are asymptomatic. Okay, so during root canal treatment, it is very difficult to extirpate the pulp. This picture shows concentric rings of this. These are the discrete denticles. They are isolated. Okay, so that we saw as denticles, and they are true and false. And next is resorption of the teeth. So till now we saw the regressive alterations of enamel, dentin, and pulp. So now moving on to the external surface of the tooth. So that could be the resorption of teeth. It could be an external resorption or internal resorption. External resorption at the root tips, it can happen. Okay, so it could occur in the deciduous teeth, mainly during shedding of the teeth. In permanent teeth, it could be due to various stimulus, mainly the periodontal condition where there is periodontitis causing resorption of the tooth. And there's something called as internal resorption where there is resorption within the tooth causing the dissolution of the dentin and the enamel. And this will manifest as pink tooth. So the causes of external resorption could be periapical inflammation, that is cyst, granuloma, abscess, anything on the periapical region could cause external resorption. And another one is reimplantation of the teeth. When the tooth falls out and we try to reimplant the teeth, so even then the teeth will go in for resorption. And sometimes a tumor and cyst also could cause the resorption of the teeth. And excessive mechanical or occlusal force, mainly the masticatory force they mean here, and impaction of the tooth, and sometimes it is idiopathic. And the internal resorption is purely idiopathic, is unknown. So moving on to the external resorption. So the resorption associated with the periapical inflammation. So resorption of the tissues, dental tissues occurs similar to that of the bone, but we don't see any of the osteoclasts present over there. On the histological section, the active participation of osteoclast is not being reported, but there is resorption of the tooth. Could be due to the odontoclast, that is the tooth resorbing cells. So next could be a periapical granuloma, which is the sequelae of pulpitis, and this causes resorption of the tooth because this granuloma, we know it is a chronic inflammatory reaction. So when there is a chronic inflammation, definitely it will destroy the adjacent tissues, and the adjacent tissue present there is resorption of the tooth. And here there is resorption of the tooth as well as the resorption of the bone, resulting in a large periapical radiolucency. And in the radiograph, we see there is ruggedness or blunting of the root apex, and this could also be seen not only related to the periapical lesions. Sometimes we unknowingly do a short fillings or a projected filling. Okay, so the filling, the root canal filling, which will project out of the apex of the root, and also sometimes it could be short of the root apex. So in either condition, it may result in the resorption of the tooth. So here is a picture showing there is a loss of root tip. Okay, so root tip, there is loss of tooth structure at the root tip. So this could be considered as a resorption. So this resorption along with a periapical radiolucency. So there's another condition where there could be a resorption. There is a reimplanted teeth. So we remove the tooth and we just reimplant. We don't intentionally remove. When the tooth falls out during an accident, what we do is we wash it in saline and we replace it back. So in such a case, so this could be exposed to resorption. Okay, so mostly this resorption could be replaced later by excess deposition of bone, resulting in ankylosis, very stern attachment between the tooth and the bone occurs, and there's no periodontal ligament at all. So this sort of uh, behavior could be seen in a reimplanted teeth. Sometimes there will be resorption, but not complete resorption to re-establish the periodontal ligament space. Sometimes the resorption is so extensive that it will allow the exfoliation of the reimplanted teeth itself. So there are three things that could happen with the reimplanted teeth. So one is a very good firm attachment between the bone and the teeth, resulting in ankylosis. Another one is the functional attachment or the functional resorption, where there is a little of resorption of the tooth, resulting in a proper periodontal ligament space. And another one is complete resorption resulting in exfoliation. So another condition is the tumor and cyst. So the tumor and cyst, as we all know, it's a pathological condition where there is abnormal increase in the size of the and the number of cells. So the cells keep on proliferating and proliferating and proliferating. So what will happen? It will displace the adjacent structures by more of pressure. So this pressure may lead to resorption of the tooth and resorption of the bone. So this resorption is mainly initiated by the odontoclast as well as the osteoclast. So mostly this type of resorption is seen in the apical periodontal cyst, rarely seen in the dentigerous or the fissural cyst. So this is a image showing radiolucency here on the body of the mandible, and there is resorption of the tooth from the premolar till the molar. So the apex is not as sharp as on this side. This side you could see the root apex is very sharp, whereas on this side the root apex is very blunt, and this is the resorption due to a cyst. Probably here this could be a OKC associated with impacted tooth. So next condition which could cause resorption is the excessive mechanical or the occlusal force. So mostly the occlusal force or the mechanical force is orthodontic treatment. Though the orthodontic treatment involves a very mild force, sometimes it may cause the resorption of the tooth with the predisposing factors such as hypothyroidism, where there is excessive of osteoclastic stimulation. So this could result in the tooth resorption. So here is a condition where there is no orthodontic treatment, but still there is resorption. Here there is an orthodontic tooth movement along with the blunting of the apex. So there is another condition where there is impacted teeth which will cause resorption. So how does this impacted teeth, which is protected very well within the dental follicle, is causing resorption? So let's see how it happens. So this dental follicle, which is containing the reduced enamel epithelium and the dental follicle, the dental sac is getting disrupted due to a sort of infection or a pressure. So when there is a destruction in the reduced enamel epithelium, the connective tissue tries to contact the crown of the tooth. So when the crown of the tooth contacts the connective tissue, it will result in the resorption of the crown. So mainly this could be seen in the cuspids more than the molars, okay? Because the cuspids are the last tooth to erupt in the oral cavity. Also, this could be seen in mesiodents. On X-ray, they appear as irregular destruction of the crown, and sometimes when the impacted tooth is present, the pressure of the impacted tooth may cause resorption of the adjacent tooth root. Here you could see there is complete dissolution of the tooth itself, the impacted tooth itself. Next is idiopathic resorption. So this is most common, and this is without any cause. Even the patient not undergoing any orthodontic treatment or any condition of hypothyroidism or any genetic involvement. So they don't have anything, but still they show resorption. Okay. So this is about the external resorption and its various causes. And moving on to the internal resorption, so we call it as, otherwise called as chronic perforating hyperplasia of pulp, or the internal granuloma or odontoclastoma or pink tooth of mammary. So it is an unusual form of tooth resorption, and the lesion is located centrally within the tooth, and I'll show you the picture. And this is also called as inflammatory hyperplasia of the pulp. So when there is dental caries, what will happen is it will cause destruction of enamel, destruction of dentin, then it will irritate the pulp. So when the pulp is irritated, usually the pulp will undergo degeneration. Here, the pulp is so active that it will undergo proliferation. The pulp will undergo proliferation and it will form the pink tooth of mammary. Sorry, it will form the chronic hyperplastic pulp. Okay, it forms the chronic hyperplasia of the pulp. Okay, so sometimes it could be this way, dental caries resulting in the hyperplasia of the pulp. So this is a open case where the crown is being open and the pulp is exposed, forming the hyperplasia. Okay, so that is the hyperplasia of pulp. So another condition where there is no dental caries at all, but there is inflammation in the periodontium, granulation tissue formed in the periodontium. This periodontal granuloma invades the pulp in a retrograde manner, and it will cause resorption within the crown of the or root of the tooth or entire tooth of the tooth. So clinically, the patient are asymptomatic in case of internal resorption where it is caused by the periodontal granuloma. And the first evidence is pink hue crown. Okay, so the crown appears as a pinkish one. Okay, so the crown appears as pink tooth. Okay, it is otherwise called as pink tooth of mammary. Okay, so X-ray, it appears as an abnormal radiolucency. Okay, it could be a round or ovoid radiolucent area in the central portion of the tooth. So it is associated with the pulp, but there is no dental caries. There is no contact with the external surface. So this is a wide open dental caries which had resulted in the proliferation of the pulp. So this is a schematic picture showing the proliferation of the pulpal tissue into the carious tooth. So this is the chronic hyperplastic pulpitis. And this is the pink tooth of mammary, wherein the inflammation or the granuloma of the periodontal ligament had caused the inflammation within the pulpal tissue and caused resorption of the tooth from within the tooth. And this is called as internal resorption. So this is an internal resorption. This is an internal resorption. So this is an internal resorption. An ovoid space which is not contacting the external surface of the tooth, but it appears as a radiolucent one. And clinically, it appears as pink. So histologically, we could see variable degree of resorption. So this resorption is identified or manifested as presence of more or abundant of osteoclast or odontoclast. So there is excessive proliferation of the pulpal tissue along with more of inflammatory cells. Sometimes if there is alternative resorption and repair, it could have the formation of osteodentin. When the resorption is more and more and more, the dentin gets thinned out and the enamel is affected, and it perforates the enamel and on the crown portion and perforates the cementum on the root portion. The treatment, if it is an internal resorption, go in for RCT. If it is a perforated one, then you have to go for extraction. Next is the one involving cementum. So it is mainly the hypercementosis. We don't have something called as hypocementosis. Okay, so it is the hypercementosis, or otherwise called as cemental hyperplasia. It is a non-neoplastic condition where there is excessive deposition of cementum at a continuous rate. Okay, so it is considered again as a regressive change, and there is more deposition of secondary cementum, that is the cellular cementum. It could be over the entire root portion or at a focal area. This mostly this is an idiopathic one, or sometimes it could have a predisposing local and systemic factors. So it could be accelerated elongation of the tooth. So when there is a missing opponent tooth, where imagine a condition where we don't have a maxillary molar and there is only mandibular molar. So in search of its opponent to maintain the tooth-to-tooth contact, the lower tooth tries to supraerect. So the supraeruption at the apical region is being compensated by excess deposition of cementum. So thereby there is hypercementosis. And in condition where there is inflammation in a tooth, so or tooth repair, or a condition where there is bone disorder, that is mainly the osteitis deformans, otherwise called as Paget's disease. All these can lead to hypercementosis. So there are this hypercementosis, as I said, it could be a generalized one or localized one. And mostly in a non-functioning teeth, it is more seen. When there is absence of antagonist, that is the opposing tooth, so the tooth tries to maintain its contact with the adjacent or the opposing tooth. So in search of that, it supraerupts. So when the supraeruption happens at the apical region, there is void formation. So this void has to be filled so that the normal width of the periodontal ligament is maintained. So this could be maintained by excess deposition of cementum. So the other condition could be pulpal infection. When there is inflammation at the apex, even then it will trigger the cementoblast to form excessive cementum. And when there is trauma, that is excessive occlusal trauma, so even there is resorption followed by repair. Okay, so when there is a cemental tears, even there is excess deposition of cementum. And a condition we know is called as Paget's disease of the bone, where there is excessive deposition of the bone all over the body. Here in tooth, we have cementum at the end. So the cementum is getting more and more formed. Okay, so there is excessive deposition of the cementum and it is generalized. When you see a patient with generalized hypercementosis, imagine a condition that they may be prone to Paget's disease. So clinical features, the patients with hypercementosis, they don't have any sort of pain or any symptoms. Okay, very rarely they may be sensitivity due to periapical inflammation. So on percussion, if there is periapical inflammation, then only there will be response. Otherwise, they don't have any sort of signs and symptoms. And when you extract the tooth, in case of any tooth mobility or due to other reason, when you go for extraction, so the root tip appears as a rounded apex with a broader diameter rather than a sharp apex. And radiographically, you could see that it has a apparently blunt roots. Histologically, there is excessive deposition of secondary cementum, not the primary cementum. Okay, so primary cementum, there is the acellular cementum is only once formed. Once it is destroyed, it is replaced by the secondary cementum. So that you could see in excess. So this secondary cementum will have more of cementoblast entrapped within the cementum. So this is also called as osteocementum. And no treatment is required for this. So this is the excess cementum that is being deposited only at the root apex. This is a hypercementosis localized. This is an X-ray picture showing hypercementosis. You could see how the root tip is here in the normal tooth and how the root tip here is more blunted and more rounded. This is an hypercementosis involving the premolar as well as the molar. So next, about the cementum, it could be cementicles. We saw denticles in relation to pulp. Okay, so abnormal calcified mass seen within the pulpal tissue, we call it as denticles. So here, the same sort of calcified tissue, when you see it in the periodontal ligament space, we call it as cementicles, though the cause is unknown. So they lie freely in the periodontal ligament. So they thought that this could be dystrophic calcification. So dystrophic calcification means calcification of the dead tissue. Could be a cell rest of serrae or cell rest of Malleus specifically that is seen in the periodontal ligament space may go in for calcification and resultant cementicles. So here is given the mechanism of formation. It is the epithelial rest in the periodontal ligament, that is the cell rest of Malleus. They will calcify and they form nest, and these nest forms the nidus, and they will later enlarge and they form the globules. Okay, so they are the cementicles. So the origin could be from the cemental tears, alveolar bone, and could be focal calcification. Okay, so the calcification could be due to thrombus capillaris also. An X-ray, it's not much evident, but still very rarely you could see as a mild radio opaque